I still remember that morning like it happened yesterday. The sunlight streamed through the courtroom windows, but I felt nothing except a cold pit in my stomach. My name had been dragged through the dirt, twisted, and torn apart by someone I once called a friend. Mark. He had done this to me. My old business partner, my confidant, the one person I trusted more than anyone, had orchestrated a scheme so cruel it made my blood boil even before the trial began. I could feel my palms sweat as I walked past the rows of empty benches, imagining every whisper behind every head. The air was thick with anticipation, with judgment, and somehow, it smelled of betrayal. The gavel struck somewhere in the distance, echoing like a heartbeat I couldn't control. I had always been meticulous. Careful. Honest. Everything I built, every late night, every negotiation, every sleepless hour poured into that company, it was all at risk because Mark wanted it destroyed. And worse, he wanted me to take the fall. The moment they called my name, my heart jumped into my throat. Alex Matthews, the bailiff intoned. The courtroom fell silent. All eyes turned to me. Some looked curious, some sympathetic, but most, I could tell, were already convinced of my guilt. I could feel the heat rise to my face, my chest tighten, my fingers curl. But I forced myself to take a deep breath. I had to appear calm. I had to survive this. Mark, of course, smiled. That infuriating, smug smile. The kind of smile that tells you someone knows exactly how much they've hurt you, and they're savoring it. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking completely relaxed as if he were the one on trial instead of me. I had met him years ago, full of ambition and hope. Together, we had built something from nothing, a small tech startup that eventually started turning profit. We celebrated victories, shared dreams, even argued over trivial things like office decor and client emails. But somehow, somewhere along the line, he had turned. I hadn't seen it coming, and now here I was, accused of embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars. The whispers started as soon as I sat down. "Did you see how nervous he looks?" someone muttered. I heard his guilty. My throat tightened. I wanted to shout, to scream, to tell them all the truth, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Not now. Not in this room. Not with the evidence Mark had planted. I looked at my lawyer. She gave me a tiny nod, the kind that said, "Stay calm. Trust me." But even her eyes couldn't hide the fear, not for her, but for me. I could feel the weight of every false accusation pressing down on me. Each forged email, every manipulated bank transfer, every lie Mark had told painted a picture of a man I wasn't. I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. Anger, disbelief, and an almost unbearable sense of helplessness swirled inside me. My mind raced, flipping through every meeting, every handshake, every conversation with Mark, trying to find the moment I should have seen this coming. But there wasn't one. It had been meticulous, intentional, and personal. And yet, somewhere deep inside, beneath the panic and the fear, a spark lit. That spark was more dangerous than my anger. It was determination. I refused to let him win. I wouldn't let him destroy me, my reputation, or everything I had worked for. Because this wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about a company. This was about justice. And one day, Mark was going to wish he had never crossed me. Every day felt like walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Mark didn't stop. Not for a second. Every meeting, every phone call, every email seemed to carry another trap, another twist designed to make me look guilty. I could almost feel him laughing behind the scenes, imagining my panic, my confusion, my helplessness. I went to work, trying to keep my life normal, but the office had become a minefield. Colleagues I once trusted now avoided my gaze, whispering in corners, pretending not to notice the shaking in my hands, the tension in my jaw. Some even sided with Mark, letting him subtly influence them. It was infuriating, humiliating, and relentless. I remember one afternoon vividly. I walked into the office kitchen for a drink, only to overhear Mark laughing with one of my closest friends. "Did you see Alex today in court?" Mark's voice was silky, poisonous. "He looks like a deer in headlights." Honestly, I didn't think he had it in him to crumble this fast. My stomach turned. Every word he spoke felt like a punch, every laugh a reminder of how completely he had orchestrated my downfall. And yet, there was something else there too, something I clung to. A fire. A promise to myself that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The evidence against me was stacked high, emails I never sent, transfers I never authorized, documents forged so expertly that even my lawyer struggled to unravel them. But even as I flipped through these falsified files in despair, a tiny thought began to form in my mind. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to turn this around. I started noticing small things, inconsistencies that Mark hadn't considered. A timestamp that didn't make sense. A document that had a hidden signature. Little mistakes in his perfect web of lies. Each one was a thread, and I realized if I tugged carefully, the whole thing might unravel. But patience was key. I couldn't rush it. Revenge, I realized, wasn't just about exposing him in court, it had to be precise, surgical. It had to be so perfect, so undeniable, that there would be no room for excuses, no chance for him to wriggle free. At night, I pored over every piece of evidence, every transaction, every email. My apartment smelled of coffee and paper, and my walls seemed to echo with the weight of what had been taken from me. I felt my muscles tense, my jaw tighten, my heart hammering in my chest. Anger was my constant companion, but so was focus. I couldn't afford distractions, not now. Then came the moment that changed everything. While reviewing a batch of financial records, I noticed something Mark had overlooked, a small anomaly buried deep in the code of a transaction. It was minor, almost invisible, but it pointed directly to him. My hand shook as I stared at it. This was it. The thread I needed. The crack in his armor. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the screen, mind racing. The anger inside me shifted into something colder, sharper, and more controlled. It wasn't just fury anymore, it was strategy. And with strategy came hope. Mark had played his hand too early. He had underestimated me. And soon, I would show him exactly how dangerous being underestimated could be. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and the tiniest spark of hope. I replayed everything Mark had done, every smirk, every lie, every calculated move meant to destroy me. But now, the same replaying became fuel. Each memory sharpened my focus, each betrayal became a piece of the plan I would weave. I knew I couldn't act recklessly. Revenge demanded patience. Precision. Timing. One false move and everything I'd uncovered, everything I'd worked for, could vanish like smoke. But the anomaly I found, the tiny crack in Mark's armor, it was enough. It was my lifeline. The first thing I did was gather allies. Quietly, I contacted a private investigator, someone I could trust implicitly. I explained the situation, carefully, leaving nothing to chance. We started combing through every digital footprint Mark had left. Emails, financial records, client correspondence, nothing was too small to examine. And with each discovery, the picture became clearer. Mark's lies were extensive, meticulous, but not perfect. I remember one evening sitting in my dimly lit apartment, the city hum outside my window, coffee growing cold beside me. I opened the folder labeled Mark's Web, and it was breathtaking in its audacity. Everything he had done to frame me, meticulously documented. And yet, buried deep within it, mistakes. Small, almost human errors. The perfect leverage. I started planning. Not just to clear my name, but to turn the entire courtroom against him. To make the world see the man behind the smiling mask. Every detail mattered, timing, location, delivery. This was going to be more than justice, it was going to be theater. The idea formed in my mind slowly, almost like a whisper at first. What if I could present the truth so undeniably, so shockingly, that no one could deny it? What if Mark's entire persona, the charming, confident, untouchable businessman, crumbled in front of everyone who had ever trusted him? I began planting subtle moves. Carefully leaked financial inconsistencies to the right people, monitored his reactions, collected witness statements from those he'd manipulated, all while keeping my own presence quiet. Each step was calculated, each action measured. I became a shadow in my own life, invisible but observing, waiting for the perfect moment. And then, there was the first real taste of satisfaction. I sent a carefully worded email to one of Mark's closest associates, nothing incriminating on the surface, just a subtle hint that the truth might soon emerge. Hours later, I could sense the panic beginning to ripple through Mark's circle. A tiny, satisfying tremor in the empire he had built on lies. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long, slow breath. For the first time in months, I felt in control. For the first time, the anger didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like fuel. It felt like power. Mark had thought he could crush me, humiliate me, erase everything I'd worked for. But he had underestimated one thing, me. I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I was just getting started. The stage was set. Every lie he had told, every manipulation he had made, was about to be exposed. And when that moment came, it wouldn't just clear my name, it would destroy his. Completely. The first real move came one chilly morning. I arranged a meeting with Mark under the guise of reconciliation. It was risky, but I knew he would bite. His arrogance was his weakness, he always assumed he was untouchable. I walked into the coffee shop where we had first celebrated our company's launch, the same place that now felt like a trap. Mark arrived, smiling, oblivious. He didn't notice the small camera tucked into the corner, nor the subtle recorder I had planted beneath the table. Every word, every gesture, every hint of guilt he revealed would be captured. "Alex. It's been a while," he said, extending his hand. That smile, that condescending charm, made my blood boil. I smiled back, careful, calm. Yes, Mark. It's been too long. He launched into stories, subtle digs, and casual manipulations, thinking he was controlling the conversation. But I had rehearsed every move, anticipated every lie. I let him speak, nodding, taking notes in my mind, recording evidence with patience that felt almost superhuman. Every brag, every admission, every overconfidence would later become a nail in his coffin. After the meeting, I returned to my apartment and sifted through the footage. Mark had said more in 20 minutes than he could ever admit in court. My heart pounded as I watched him lie, mislead, and subtly incriminate himself. It was beautiful in its precision, the way truth revealed itself to those paying attention. Next came the financial web. I traced every transaction, every forged email, every manipulated document. It was like untangling a spider's nest, but I had the map now. The anomalies I had found earlier led to more inconsistencies, timestamps that didn't align, transfers that originated from his accounts but had been pinned on mine, digital footprints that screamed deception. I started preparing the final presentation, the undeniable proof that would shatter Mark's carefully constructed world. Each slide, each document, each recording was arranged for maximum impact. The courtroom would see it all, the lies, the manipulations, the betrayal. And they wouldn't just see it, they would feel it. But I didn't stop there. I reached out quietly to those Mark had manipulated, employees, clients, even minor associates. I collected statements, confirmations, whispers of truth that had been buried under his lies. They didn't even know they were helping me yet, but every word would strike him like a blade when the time came. As the days passed, tension built. Every interaction with Mark became a game of chess. I had to remain calm, invisible, strategic. His arrogance continued to show, he believed he was still in control. But control had shifted quietly, imperceptibly, to me. I was setting the stage for a performance that he couldn't even imagine, and by the time the curtains lifted, the audience would know the truth, in brutal, undeniable clarity. At night, I would sit in the dark, reviewing evidence again and again. The apartment smelled faintly of old coffee and ink-stained paper. My mind was hyper-focused. My body tense. Anger had transformed into cold, calculated patience. And I loved it. The thrill of knowing that every lie Mark had told was about to implode, it was intoxicating. Finally, I reached the point where I could see the entire sequence in my mind, the confrontation, the revelation, the humiliation, the justice. It was going to be perfect. He wouldn't see it coming, not until it was too late. And when that moment arrived, I would not only clear my name, I would expose the true face of betrayal. The morning of the trial felt unreal. Sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows, but I didn't notice it. My stomach was tight, my heart racing, and yet, a quiet confidence simmered beneath the surface. This was it, the moment everything would change. I walked into the courtroom, head held high. Mark was already there, sitting smugly at the defense table, scanning the room as if he owned it. The same arrogance that had once infuriated me now made him vulnerable. He had no idea what was coming. The trial began. My lawyer presented the case, carefully, methodically, laying out the evidence we had collected over months. But the real magic came when I stood to speak. I didn't just present facts, I told a story. Every document, every email, every manipulated bank transfer was tied to a moment, a lie, a betrayal. I let the courtroom feel it, the tension, the deceit, the injustice. Then came the recordings from our reconciliation meeting. Mark's smug, self-assured voice echoed through the room, his lies unraveling in real time. Every claim he had made to frame me now contradicted his own words. The courtroom went silent. You could almost hear the air shift. I could see him realizing, slowly, that the floor was slipping from under him. His hands clenched, his jaw tightened, his confident smile fading. Every witness I had prepared stepped forward, confirming the inconsistencies, recounting how Mark had manipulated them, lied to them, and attempted to ruin me. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully. Mark's attempts to interrupt, to charm, to misdirect, it all crumbled. Every move I had predicted, every piece of planning, every detail I had meticulously recorded was working. And then came the final blow, the digital forensics report. Every email, every transaction, every traceable digital footprint that proved Mark's orchestrated frame-up was laid bare. The courtroom gasped. Mark's face went pale. For the first time, the man who had been untouchable looked completely exposed, completely powerless. Your Honor, I said, voice steady but charged with emotion, I have proof that the defendant deliberately orchestrated this entire scheme to ruin me, to steal my company, and to frame me for crimes I did not commit. Mark's lips trembled. He stammered, tried to deny it, but it was useless. Every attempt to escape, every plea, every word he had relied on as a shield now bounced back like a boomerang, hitting him with full force. The judge's gavel struck. Silence fell. Then, a declaration, The court recognized the evidence, and Mark's lies were exposed for everyone to see. Justice had been served. I sank into the chair, finally allowing myself to breathe. Relief, triumph, and an almost overwhelming sense of validation washed over me. Months of sleepless nights, anger, and careful planning had led to this moment. And it was perfect. Mark slumped in his seat, defeated, humiliated, and powerless. For the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight of betrayal lift from my shoulders. After the trial, I walked out of the courthouse into the crisp afternoon air. The sun hit my face, and for the first time in months, I felt free. Free from the weight of lies, free from the suffocating fear, free from the person who had tried to destroy me. Sitting alone later that evening, I reflected on everything that had happened. Betrayal had a way of breaking you, of shaking every trust you ever had. But it also had a way of teaching you patience, strategy, and the value of timing. Revenge wasn't just about anger, it was about justice. And when justice is earned, it's sweeter than anything else in the world. I thought about Mark. He had believed himself untouchable, above consequence. But arrogance is always a weakness. Lies always leave a trail. And when someone is clever enough to follow it, even the most careful villain will fall. Watching his face crumble in court, seeing the power shift, I felt a surge of validation I will never forget. And yet, I didn't celebrate with gloating or malice. There was a calm, almost serene satisfaction in knowing the truth was finally visible, undeniable. I had survived, and I had triumphed, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my life. To anyone watching this story, remember, betrayal hurts, injustice feels unbearable, and anger can consume you. But channel it. Focus it. Plan with precision. True revenge isn't impulsive, it's deliberate, smart, and completely satisfying when executed correctly. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, drop a comment telling us the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Karma has a way of catching up, and sometimes, justice is sweeter than anyone can imagine. Even after Mark was exposed and justice served, life didn't just snap back into place. The world outside the courtroom was quieter, but my mind never stopped replaying every move, every lie, every manipulation. Some nights, I would lie awake wondering, had I truly seen all of Mark's schemes, or were there secrets still buried, waiting to resurface? The company slowly returned to stability, employees regained trust, and clients who had once doubted me returned. But every congratulatory handshake felt tinged with caution, as if the shadow of betrayal lingered over us all. I realized that sometimes, even when justice wins, scars remain, invisible, silent, but present. Then came the unexpected. Weeks later, I received a letter, no return address. Inside, a single phrase scrawled in jagged handwriting, "You think it's over, it's not." My heart skipped. I didn't know if it was Mark, a loyal accomplice, or just someone trying to stir fear. But one thing was certain, the story wasn't finished, not completely. I smiled faintly, a cold, steady smile. I was ready. I had learned that revenge isn't a single act, it's vigilance, patience, and strategy. If someone tried to undermine me again, I knew I could handle it. This time, the control was mine entirely. Every decision, every move, every counterstrike would be calculated, precise, and devastating if necessary. Even in the quiet moments, when the adrenaline faded and life seemed normal, I remained alert. The scars of betrayal had sharpened me, honed me, and transformed me. And I knew, deep down, that no one would ever underestimate me again. Because Alex Matthews wasn't just a victim of lies. He was a man who had survived, adapted, and emerged stronger than anyone could imagine, ready for whatever darkness came next. Weeks had passed since Mark's fall. Life appeared normal on the surface, the company thriving, clients reassured, and colleagues finally at ease. But for me, Alex, every calm moment carried an undercurrent of tension. Something in the back of my mind whispered that victory, no matter how sweet, rarely comes without consequences. It started with small things. An unfamiliar car parked near my apartment. A shadow moving in the reflection of a shop window. A vague sense that I was being watched. My instincts, sharpened by months of betrayal and careful planning, refused to ignore these signs. I reviewed every detail of Mark's downfall. Could there be someone else connected to him, someone who had escaped exposure? Someone who might seek revenge not just on me, but on everything I had rebuilt? My pulse quickened, and yet, I felt a strange thrill. This was no longer panic, it was preparation. I would not be caught off guard again. I began documenting everything. Phone calls, emails, strange sightings. Each tiny clue became a piece of a puzzle I intended to solve before any real threat could emerge. Months of betrayal had taught me that foresight was as powerful as action. Then, one evening, a message arrived on an anonymous account: "You got lucky once. Don't get comfortable." No signature, no return path, just a stark, threatening line. My stomach tightened, but my mind immediately went to work. I would trace this, expose it, and turn it into an advantage, just as I had done with Mark. I smiled faintly to myself. Revenge had changed me. I was no longer just a victim, I had become a strategist, a silent force. And if anyone thought they could touch me, they would find that I had anticipated it all. Every move, every lie, every attempt to undermine me would be met with precision, patience, and an unyielding resolve. Because even in victory, I had learned one hard truth: shadows linger, threats hide, and the world rarely lets you forget. But shadows also make you stronger, sharper, and unstoppable, if you're smart enough to see them coming. And I was. Months had passed since the courtroom victory. Mark's name was disgraced, his empire shattered, and his confidence completely broken. Most people would have considered the chapter closed, a clean ending. But I, Alex, knew better. I had seen how people like him operate, and I had learned that even after total exposure, consequences can linger. It started subtly. A note slipped under my office door: "You think it's over. It's not." No signature, no indication who had sent it. Just those 6 words, enough to unsettle me, enough to remind me that vigilance never ends. I checked the surveillance tapes, cross-referenced visitor logs, even traced IP addresses from recent emails. Nothing. Whoever it was, they were skilled, careful. And that meant they were dangerous. I felt the old surge of focus, the same one that had driven me through Mark's betrayal and revenge. But now it was different, sharper, more controlled. I was no longer reacting. I was planning, anticipating, and preparing for anything. Every night, I reviewed strategies, calculated risks, and thought several moves ahead. The experience with Mark had taught me that the perfect strike requires patience. The perfect defense requires foresight. And I had both. Then came the first real lead. A familiar pattern emerged, someone using tactics eerily similar to Mark's previous schemes: subtle digital manipulations, planted evidence, whisper campaigns. My instincts told me this was connected, though not necessarily from him. Someone else, someone learning from the old master, testing me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dim city lights through my window. A cold smile crept across my face. Threats, shadows, unseen enemies, they no longer scared me. They sharpened me. They reminded me that I was ready for whatever came next. Because Alex Matthews wasn't just a survivor. I was a strategist, a silent force, a man who had learned that even after victory, vigilance and patience were the ultimate weapons. And if anyone thought they could strike me, they would soon discover that I had already anticipated it, and I was waiting. The world outside might think the story was over. But for me, the story had only evolved. Shadows remain, and I had learned how to move within them, unseen, unshakable, unstoppable. Even as life appeared calm, I could feel it, a subtle vibration beneath the surface of everything. Mark was gone from the picture, humiliated and powerless, but someone else was out there. Someone learning from him, watching, waiting. It began with small anomalies: files moved on my computer without explanation, encrypted emails appearing from unknown accounts, faint footsteps in the hall late at night. Nothing concrete, just whispers of something lurking. But my instincts, honed through months of betrayal and revenge, screamed danger. I decided to act preemptively. I doubled down on surveillance, digital tracking, and internal audits at the company. Every device, every network, every shadow was monitored. I knew the past had taught me one thing: you never wait for a threat to strike, you anticipate it, and you prepare a counterattack. Then, a cryptic message arrived on an anonymous account. "You destroyed him, but you can't escape the pattern. It continues." The words were short, but the meaning was chilling. Someone had taken lessons from Mark's mistakes and was now testing me. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with excitement. This wasn't just a threat, it was a game, a challenge. And I had learned to win. I began tracing the digital breadcrumbs. Each small hint revealed subtle patterns: financial manipulations, false rumors, planted evidence. It was clear, someone wanted to see if I could be broken a second time. But I was no longer the same man. Alex Matthews had survived, adapted, and emerged stronger than ever. That night, as I sat in the dim glow of my monitors, a cold grin formed. Every move they made would be anticipated. Every lie would be countered. Every threat neutralized before it even became real. I had become something beyond a victim, a strategist, a sentinel, a silent force capable of protecting what I had built and punishing anyone foolish enough to challenge me. And so, the world could continue thinking the story was over. The world could rest easy, believing Mark's fall was the end. But I knew the truth: shadows linger, threats remain, and Alex Matthews is always watching. The game had only evolved. And I was ready. Days blurred into nights. Even after months of careful planning, exposure, and revenge, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still observing me. It wasn't paranoia, my instincts had been proven right too many times. Every movement I made was deliberate, measured. Every interaction with colleagues, clients, even casual acquaintances, was filtered through a lens of caution. The faintest shadow, the slightest irregularity, caught my attention immediately. Then it happened, an email arrived, encrypted and unsigned. The subject line read, "Are you truly untouchable?" My heart skipped a beat, but instead of fear, a surge of adrenaline coursed through me. Whoever this was, they were bold. They were testing me. And I welcomed it. I spent hours dissecting the email. Tiny inconsistencies, subtle traces, hidden markers, someone had left breadcrumbs, almost like they wanted me to notice. Whoever it was, they had skill, knowledge, and patience. But so did I. I called in my private investigator, reviewing every recent anomaly. Together, we traced patterns, cross-referenced digital footprints, and slowly mapped a network that hinted at a second player, someone who had learned from Mark's mistakes and now sought to challenge me. The thrill of strategy returned, stronger than ever. Revenge had taught me patience, cunning, and foresight. And now, these lessons were being tested on a new, invisible adversary. I realized this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was a game of intellect, patience, and precision. Every move they made, every subtle provocation, would be countered, anticipated, and ultimately neutralized. As I leaned back in my chair, staring into the dark city skyline, I felt a familiar calm. Shadows linger, threats exist, and enemies watch. But Alex Matthews had survived worse. He had outsmarted betrayal, humiliation, and manipulation. And now, he would do it again. Because in this game, there were no coincidences. Every shadow had a source, and every source would eventually be revealed. Every day, I watched and waited. The new threat, this silent watcher, was careful, almost invisible, leaving only faint traces that hinted at their presence. But I had learned from Mark. Patience, observation, and meticulous planning were my weapons. I began setting subtle traps. Nothing overt, just small tests designed to reveal patterns. A fake email, a monitored phone call, slight changes in digital activity. Each action was calculated, each reaction measured. Whoever this was, they were clever, but arrogance is often the downfall of the clever. Late one night, as rain streaked the windows of my apartment, a pattern emerged. A single IP address repeated across multiple anomalies, hidden behind proxies and encrypted tunnels. The realization hit me, someone was deliberately provoking me, testing my vigilance, and trying to push me into a mistake. I allowed myself a thin smile. I wasn't going to be provoked. I wasn't going to react impulsively. Instead, I turned the game back on them. I traced deeper, cross-referencing old evidence, patterns from Mark's previous actions, and minor inconsistencies the watcher had left. Slowly, methodically, I began to narrow the net. I also contacted a few trusted colleagues discreetly, just enough to monitor certain interactions without alerting anyone. Every detail mattered. Every move had to be precise. Revenge had taught me control, and now that control would be my advantage. Then came the breakthrough. One small slip in timing, a delayed response to a fake email I had sent, revealed something crucial: the watcher had a connection to Mark. Not Mark directly, but someone who had learned from him, someone who wanted to finish what he had started. I leaned back, letting out a slow, steady breath. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. This was about strategy, anticipation, and ensuring that any hidden threats were neutralized before they could act. And I realized, with a cold certainty, the ultimate confrontation was coming. Not in court this time, not in public, this would be private, personal, and precise. And when it happened, I would be ready. Weeks passed, and the tension only grew. The silent watcher was becoming bolder, leaving just enough evidence to let me know they were testing my limits. Every alert, every anomaly, every subtle provocation was a signal, and I refused to be baited. I began mapping their moves like a chessboard. Every email, every digital footprint, every minor slip became a piece in the strategy one was constructing. Whoever this person was, they were confident, experienced, and meticulous, almost as if they had been trained by Mark himself. But they underestimated me. I started setting more intricate traps. Fake transactions, phantom meetings, and decoy communications, each designed to provoke a traceable response. My mind, sharpened by months of betrayal, revenge, and careful observation, analyzed each reaction with precision. Late one night, I reviewed a series of encrypted messages. Something jumped out, a subtle signature I had noticed before, now repeated with a slight variation. It was enough. Enough to link the new adversary directly to someone in Mark's former circle. I knew now that this wasn't random, it was deliberate, personal, and targeted. A calm resolve settled over me. The past months had prepared me for this moment. The sleepless nights, the endless planning, the careful collection of evidence, it all led to this. The final confrontation wasn't just imminent, it was inevitable. I sent a carefully worded message to a trusted insider, one that would ensure the hidden threat would walk into the trap I had prepared. It wasn't brute force, and it wasn't luck, it was pure strategy, honed through experience, patience, and a desire for complete control. Sitting back in my apartment, the city lights flickering through the blinds, I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. This wasn't fear. This was anticipation. Every lesson I had learned from Betrayal, every move I had made against Mark, every long night spent untangling lies had led to this. And when the moment finally came, the person testing me would realize one undeniable truth: Alex Matthews doesn't just survive betrayal, he dominates it. The pieces were finally falling into place. Weeks of observation, careful traps, and patient calculation had revealed enough to predict my adversary's next move. Whoever had learned from Mark's methods was confident, perhaps overconfident, and that was exactly what I needed. I reviewed my plans once more, checking every digital trap, every decoy transaction, every monitored communication. The city outside my window was quiet, but inside, my mind raced with anticipation. This confrontation wouldn't just be a test, it would be the final proof that patience and precision always triumph over arrogance and deceit. Late at night, a subtle notification appeared, a minor anomaly in the network, almost invisible, but enough to confirm my prediction. They had taken the bait. Every move they had made was now trackable, every step leading directly to the moment I had prepared. I could almost hear their confidence as they crept closer, unaware that the net was closing. The thrill of strategy surged through me, a reminder of every sleepless night spent untangling Mark's lies, every long day of meticulous planning, every careful maneuver that had brought me here. I called my trusted ally, providing final instructions and confirming timing. Everything had to be flawless. One misstep, and this shadow could vanish before I had a chance to confront them. But I knew it wouldn't. I had anticipated every reaction, every contingency, every subtle move they might make. As I waited, I reflected briefly on how far I had come. From being framed, humiliated, and powerless, to carefully reclaiming my life, exposing Mark, and now facing a new threat, I had transformed. Alex Matthews wasn't the same man who had entered that courthouse months ago. I was stronger, sharper, and unshakable. Then, a subtle vibration from my phone signaled their arrival into the trap I had set. Calmly, I rose from my chair. This was it. The culmination of months of patience, strategy, and revenge. And when they realized what had happened, there would be no escape, no excuses, no second chances. The final confrontation was about to begin. The night was quiet, but the tension in the apartment was electric. Every trap I had set, every observation I had made, every calculated move over the past months led to this moment. The hidden adversary, the one who had tried to manipulate, provoke, and test me, was finally in my control. The subtle vibration of my carefully monitored phone signaled their final step into the trap. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I moved silently, confident in every measure I had prepared. As they entered, masked by the shadows, I turned on the lights and stepped forward. The recognition in their eyes was instantaneous. They had assumed I would be caught off guard, that my patience had limits. But they underestimated me. "You should have stayed in the shadows," I said, voice calm but deadly precise. "Every move you made, every provocation, I anticipated it all." They froze, realizing too late that every single path they had taken had been mapped, monitored, and countered. There was no escape, no manipulations left. The hunter had become the prey. With a calm efficiency, I revealed every piece of evidence I had collected: financial trails, digital footprints, and recorded admissions, proving beyond doubt that they had learned from Mark's schemes and were now attempting to finish what he started. Panic flickered across their face. For the first time, they were powerless. Every lie, every deception, every attempt to unsettle me had collapsed. They had no choice but to surrender. I leaned back, letting a deep breath out. The satisfaction was overwhelming. Months of betrayal, humiliation, planning, and patience had led to this ultimate justice. Not impulsive revenge, not chaos, precision, strategy, and control. In the days that followed, the hidden adversary was exposed, their plans dismantled, and the final threat eliminated. My name was fully cleared, my company secured, and my life reclaimed. Sitting alone in the quiet of my apartment, I reflected on everything: betrayal, loss, revenge, patience, and justice. Every painful lesson had forged a sharper, stronger version of myself. I realized that revenge, when executed with precision and patience, was not just satisfying, it was transformative. Alex Matthews was no longer a victim. I was a strategist, a survivor, and a man who had turned every betrayal into a weapon, every lie into leverage, and every shadow into an opportunity for control. The world had tested me, but I had prevailed. And in that quiet, victorious moment, I understood something vital: Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your power.